Hi there, this is Dylan, and I'm really overheated and dehydrated right now, but this is the opportunity that I'm being given to make a video this moment, so I'm taking it. So I'm recording this from a park and trying to figure out how to use words because my brain feels like it's melting. The point of this video is going to be to talk about what a day in our life looks like. Every day is kind of different, but today has been rather eventful, and I was thinking that it would be a good opportunity to just try and remember as much as I can from the start until now, and it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And just so that you guys can get a feel for what life's like for us right now. So, this morning, we were woken up by our husband around 5 probably, a bit before it got light, and he woke up to go get his morning coffee, I believe, and we were lying at our camp, which is near downtown in the town we're in, but kind of hidden out of the way. We found a really interesting spot. For safety reasons, I'm not going to say too much about it, but we've been sleeping in this really nice spot for the past few days that hopefully will last us a while, because I feel like there's some really good healing energy there, and it's pretty clean and pretty hidden, but still in a kind of a central location, which is what we're looking for right now. So he woke me up to go get his coffee, and I sort of drifted off back to sleep for a bit, but then I was woken up again by an older gentleman who I guess had been sleeping nearby, but we didn't know he was there, and I remember feeling a lot of anxiety, because even though he seemed like he wasn't a dangerous person, I still felt anxious because I was afraid that he may have heard some of the intimate conversation I had been having with my husband before he left. It wasn't particularly personal or embarrassing, but it was private, and, you know, one of the hardest parts of being homeless is the lack of privacy, and not always knowing when there's someone around the corner who may be listening to what you're saying. But he was very respectful, and I was respectful to him, and for a moment he stopped because he wasn't sure whether to step over my blankets, which were blocking the way, and I told him to go ahead and walk on them. It was all right, and so he did, and then someone rode by on their bike, I guess, from what my husband had said, as he was walking back and saw it at the time. The person was playing this Irish metal music that was really cool, and I thought to myself, he's lucky that I like that kind of music, because I started to get really agitated really fast, having just been woken up twice, and then before I could go back to sleep, all this music was blasting. But it passed quickly, and then my husband returned, Thomas, and we had a really lovely, rare opportunity to make love, which I don't want to be too personal here, but I'm trying to just be real about what my day was like today. And so we had a very rare opportunity to do that. It could be very difficult being on the street, trying to find safe places and just find the energy, because it's just so draining every day. But that was lovely and refreshing, and while I am not begrudging it whatsoever, it did open up some space for me to process some traumas, which I got flooded with when I went back to sleep afterwards for a bit, and then I was woken up pretty quickly out of an absolutely horrific nightmare flashback experience in which I relived horrific abuse from my mother in MK Ultra. In the nightmare flashback, she was sexually torturing me, and there was another man there. May have been my father, I'm not sure. He was very blurry, and I was seeing everything in fragments, and it was like there were all these triangles of blurred shadow and splintered glass kind of images as I was going in and out of consciousness. And in the memory parts were trying to reconnect and stay as grounded as possible for the abuse so that we could undo our programming. But after a bit, a part got too overwhelmed and drifted off into a fantasy world, and then that's the last thing I remember before my husband woke me up. And then I talked to him about it for a little bit, processed it. He does his very best to hold space for us and has specifically made a point of making sure that there's space for us to share about nightmares when we wake up. And then I found myself so exhausted and so depleted from it that I basically couldn't move. And we finally determined that if I just went across the street and didn't try to help pack up, that I thought I could manage to make it there, but that the thought of having to pack all our stuff up was just too tiring. So I went and did that after smoking some weed and eating a little bit of food. And I sat under a tree and grounded myself. And then a few minutes later, husband came out with our stuff. And I think that at some point in there, I had to go to the bathroom, and the only place to go nearby was these small trees / bushes near where we sleep. And it's not the most comfortable place, but it is hidden enough, and so I was able to do that. And then after sitting for a minute with Thomas, he went to go to a medical appointment, and I went to go to the park to wait for him. As we only have one phone right now between the two of us, we have to agree where we're going to meet and then stick to it if we separate. So I agreed to go to the park because that had a bathroom that was going to open up in about an hour from then. And I knew better than to try and park myself anywhere where there wasn't one. So I started walking, but then I got stopped because I saw this tree where some people have been doing this art project, and there was an invitation on it, kind of an open invitation to the community to participate. So I stopped and I sat for a minute, and oh no, I think I've forgotten, that was after something else happened. Before that happened, I went to a store to go and to get some sewing supplies because I'd run out of thread, and I've been spending several hours a day working on sewing projects. This has become a huge passion of mine. And so I went to this store, and I saw that it wasn't open yet. So I saw an older gentleman, also someone on the street, sitting in front. And I figured he wouldn't know what time it was, but I asked him anyway. And he told me. And because it happened that he knew that it was approximately the time when the store was going to open. So I thought, okay, I'll just wait here for a few minutes with him. And we ended up having a very emotional conversation. I'm not going to share personal details from his life, even though I'm sure none of you would know who he was. But I listened to him for a while. He ended up getting slightly inappropriate towards me, which was uncomfortable, but I played it off as best I could, tried to show him compassion because he was obviously a drinker, and I have experience with that situation, to say the least, even though I don't drink anymore. And I specifically have a lot of empathy for older drunks on the street. So when it felt appropriate, I excused myself to go into the store, and I was extremely anxious because I had my bags with me, and usually my husband will wait outside with all our stuff while I go in, or vice versa. But this time we separated, and I had some of my bags. So I walked in very prepared for abuse from a store person, and I immediately announced to the clerk working there that, I asked them if they wanted me to leave my bags up front, and showed willingness to do that because I am used to people immediately demanding that I put my bags up front as if I was going to use them to shoplift, and as if I, wasn't going to be willing. But it turned out that that person was really sweet, and I think like-minded. They're very queer-looking and a bit counterculture-looking individual. We made some small talk about having similar hair, and I bought the sewing kit with some money that I made from recycling, from collecting cans and bottles and turning them in at a recycling center for a small amount of money, and also from being blessed by some strangers recently. I then started walking to the park, and that's when I found the tree with the art. And while I had been talking to this gentleman in front of the store, that's how I remembered that happened first, he had told me about a child that he had seen in a neighboring town who, from what he described, was being sexually exploited. And it really hit close to home for me, obviously, as a survivor of child sex trafficking and someone who was homeless from extremely young. And sorry, I just saw the most absolutely beautiful lizard, like this bright blue lizard. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. It's going to take me a second to collect myself. I get very excited about things like that. But anyways, on this serious note, he told me about this child that he had seen who looked exploited. And I decided that I would make my contribution to this tree project about that. I happened to have something perfect for it in my sewing kit. I had to buy new sewing supplies, but I still had some of my old ones. So I sat down and I decided to make a real practice of it, as I've been dedicating myself to being more mindful about these kinds of things and really kind of ritualizing them more in a positive fashion. So I sat down and smoked some weed, and I did some drumming on this drum that some traveler girls gave me the other night. I had a really beautiful experience where I met some girls who were traveling, and they had this instrument that they wanted to give me because I guess they had seen me singing out on the street a few nights before and were very moved by it. And so now I've been walking around with this drum, and I've been playing on it every day. So I sat and I played on this drum and tried to connect spiritually to this child. And then I realized I had to use the bathroom again, and it was going to be a little ways to the park. So I finished what I was doing, put my piece on the tree, and I also made another art piece for it of my own accord. I have been doing some art involving drawing on rocks. So I did a project involving drawing on this rock, and then I headed to the park. When I got to the park, I saw that the bathrooms were still being cleaned, and I was very afraid to ask the people at the park who were cleaning it when it would be open, because oftentimes such people are abusive to me for being homeless, no matter how polite I am. But this time, even though the people there seemed to have a strong reaction to me emotionally, they were very nice. One of them agreed to watch my stuff, while the other one had offered to open up the space for me to go in and quickly use the bathroom. She even cleaned one of the toilets for me first, and also let me fill up my water bottle. And it was very sweet, and it made me feel a lot better about the abuse that I've been experiencing on the street. And after making the best conversation I could, I went around the corner and I sang for a while, and I used this big poster board that I made. I wrote a bunch of song names on it, for my busking and for my own personal reference when I'm practicing. And so I laid it out, and I sat under this tree and I sang to myself. And I also, while I wasn't trying to be obnoxious or anything, I was just trying to bring light. I was hoping that it would bring some positivity to the people at the park who had been nice to me, because they were still around the corner. And even though we didn't say anything about it, I felt this sense like my singing moved them, and that my attempt at showing gratitude had been received. Being hyper empathetic, I can often feel these things from people, so that was healing. And I also did some sewing. I repaired a patch for a goth band that I love that was falling off of my leather jacket, and that made me feel better. And then some parts started to get into conflict about it because we were really hungry and we didn't have any more food with us. And we started making mistakes with the sewing. And just as we were getting super frustrated and decided to put it away, our husband showed up with the absolute perfect timing. And we then went and headed out to a place to get free lunch at a church. Unfortunately, the people there are for the most part not kind. They do not care, and they are often openly hostile to the people who get food there. And today, for whatever reason, I don't really know their schedule fully yet. I thought there would be food. So did a lot of other people who seem to go there regularly. But for whatever reason, they said there was no food, and they acted like this was to be expected. And the lady who told us this was obviously not caring. And I got very upset because not only was I very hungry, didn't appreciate being turned away with the callousness she displayed, but I also witnessed something very terrible. A man walked up to her asking her about food, and he started to ask her for help on behalf of a friend of his who was experiencing some abuse. He'd said that he had found this person who was being abused and he wanted help, and she, without actually spitting in his face, basically spit in his face, and without actually telling him to go fuck himself, basically told him to go fuck himself and turned him away and just walked away from him. And it was really hideous, and I became really enraged and told my husband we had to go because I was going to freak out on this lady if she tried to talk to me again. So we left and we headed over to a place to get food. We would have gone into the bigger grocery store nearby, but we had experienced abuse last night there. My husband was trying to wait outside for me to go in the store, and someone came out and was microaggressive and demanded we leave and was not capable of understanding that we were humans, and he was just waiting for me to use the bathroom, and we were going to do some shopping. We already had done some shopping, and there was no need to be like that, but this person was obviously very ill and incapable of comprehending that, so it made me feel unsafe to go back there. So we decided to just go ahead and get food from this other place where the food was, there was less food to choose from, less actual decent food to choose from, but we just got a couple slices of pizza because the people there had been nice to us. And then we went to sit outside and try and take a breath and ground ourselves. But almost immediately, someone who we had talked to earlier came up, and no shame to them, but I got overloaded by it and did my best to be polite, but it was just too much being just immediately, one person after another, like all day had kind of tried to interact with us. So I was getting overwhelmed. But we were cordial, and they, I think, sensed that we weren't really capable of conversating, so they left, and that was nice of them. But then almost immediately after they left, someone else showed up, someone who is an evangelist who had previously tried to evangelize us a couple days before, and I was absolutely not capable of handling that. I needed so badly just to be able to breathe and take a second, but it just wasn't happening. So I started having a panic attack, and in the meantime, my husband seemed interested actually in talking to this person. He's kind of taken it upon himself to try and have positive connections with people like that and share about his sense of spirituality with them. So we left him for a few minutes to talk to this guy while we went and had a panic attack nearby. The only place we found nearby that was in the shade where we weren't going to get sunburned was a place that was covered in no loitering, no trespassing signs, we were a bit intimidated to stand there, but we weren't going to be long, so we just stood there for a few minutes, and as soon as we felt calm enough, we went back because we didn't want to leave our husband there for too long either. And when we got back, we realized we had to use the bathroom, and the only place was that grocery store across the street. As far as we knew in that moment, I think there actually was another one, but we had forgotten because we were too anxious. So we went there, and luckily didn't have any problems. We're in and out very quickly. We went back, and with all the strength we could muster, ignored that guy and just told her husband, hey, we need to go. So we excused ourselves, and I managed to maintain my boundaries and not have to engage with that person, which is very hard for me as a cult survivor, but also very necessary that when I can't do it, I don't. So then we left to go to this park, but almost immediately someone came up to us and asked us if we had any weed. And someone had blessed us with a large amount of swag, which is, for people who don't smoke, it's really shitty weed. But it was still weed, and so we decided to give this person some. And we stepped off to the side to do that. And then, because that's what they said would make them feel more comfortable. And then where we stepped off to the side, some more people came up and told us someone was looking for us. And I believe that person was someone who had taken our picture the other day, which was something that was very hard for us, but he said he was doing a project, a photography project, documenting homeless people and travelers. And he'd been very kind to us. He took our pictures, and then he gave us some money, and it seems like he's been looking for us since, probably to ask for our permission to publish it somewhere. But unfortunately, we keep missing him. And even though that whole thing makes me feel very nervous and uncomfortable, and sharing that on here makes me even more uncomfortable, we felt like it was important to do, and it just felt like it felt correct. And you know, we had no expectations of him giving us any money for it. It just happened that way. It just felt like something that we should do as a positive way to connect with the community, you know, the greater community of the world, to kind of bridge gap between homeless people and housed people. We like to participate in things like that when the opportunity arises. So these people told us that someone was looking for us, and we figured it was him. And they told us where to go, so we headed that way instead. I guess it was kind of on our way to the park. We didn't find him. We did walk through a sea of well-off people, and it looked like a young girl who might not have been more than 16. I'm not entirely sure she was talking about us, but it seemed like she was saying some really ignorant stuff about us as we walked by, which was just, it was honestly astounding, but I can't say I'm too surprised. My video is probably going to time out soon, but I'm just going to keep going until it does. So, we didn't see this person. We decided, you know, we didn't feel safe to stick around the area because of the amount of wealthy people who were looking at us poorly and possibly talking about us in front of us poorly. So we kept walking, went to this park. Our husband had discovered this kind of out-of-the-way little park where there's a place we could charge our electronics, which is very important. It's part of why we haven't been posting as much this last week, as we've been struggling to find places to do that. But he found this place where we could plug in, and so here we are. We're at this park now. Shortly after we got here, though, we realized we had to use the bathroom again, and so I went back first. Both of us had to, and I went back first towards where we'd been before, where there were some porta potties. Unfortunately, I started having a panic attack about it because someone attacked me for trying to use them. I think it was yesterday morning. Some men were using leaf blowers to clean up the area, and one of them did not want me to use the porta potty because I'm homeless, I assume. He thought that I was homeless, and he took the leaf blower and started blowing it at the porta potty, trying to force me out of it. I fully consider that an attack, and it was very pointed. They were across the street, and he went across the street and then started aiming it at the porta potty where I was. Luckily, he did this after I'd been in there for a couple minutes, and I was actually leaving when he did. However, I had to hide in the porta potty and wait for him to stop blowing it at me before I opened the door. Finally, he did, and I was able to leave. But it made going back there intimidating. I was already intimidated to go there because of its location, proximity to well-off people who eat food nearby. But I had to use it because it was the closest thing, and I didn't feel safe to go back to the park, which is the next bathroom, because I had a bad feeling about it. I had this gut feeling that something bad would happen, so I chose to go to that porta potty. But like I said, I was panicked about it, and it's really hot outside, and I was overheating, and I started to have a meltdown, as I'm on the autism spectrum, and have a panic attack. And when I got into the porta potty, it was so horribly hot that I felt like I was going to faint. And when I left, without even really getting to use the bathroom, I realized that I had dissociated into an altar and didn't know where I fully was. And it took us a minute to figure out how to get back, and we ended up wandering around the area, going out of our way, and we didn't have water with us because right now our husband and I only have one water bottle, and I didn't want to leave him without it. So finally I managed to make it back here and then start recording this video. And that's been my day. So, wow, that was 25 minutes. Only describing a few hours of what may not sound like too much, but for me this is a very exhausting day. And, you know, I think it's important that people understand that we carry everything we own on our back and in our hands, and we have to walk everywhere. So all of this takes a lot out of us, and not getting that much sleep, being on the street, even though we do have a nice spot right now, we don't get the best sleep. It just makes this so taxing, and our disabilities make it also taxing. But there were lots of blessings today, lots of goodness. I just remembered there was someone else we ran into who we don't feel the safest around. This person also drinks, but they brought positivity to us, and they directed us towards a resource center that might have some stuff we need. So that was also a good thing. So this basically concludes what I wanted to say. I don't know how many people will listen to this in full, but the very last thing I want to say is that we have had a huge breakthrough in our process, one that we're going to be trying to document in videos. It involves us restructuring our system very deeply, and ceasing to integrate on a lot of levels, and trying to get our system grounded and solidified in the amount of multiplicity we currently have. I think this is a very important stage that we're at in our healing process. We have kind of gone through this multiple times before, no pun intended, but now it's really sinking in. We're ready to start really living as the system we are, and developing better communication, better relationship between the parts that are currently here. And part of that is that we've been working specifically with very little child alters to change names from being stuff that was given to us by abusers, or names that they were just kind of randomly assigned by bigs, to names based on their interests. So I have this list of names right here, and I'm going to read them aloud. It's based on stuff they like. It's a bunch of kind of hippie love child stuff, because that's who we are. So we have Candle, Parker, Laurel, Pebble, Rainbow, Lost, Weevil, Pinecone, Lemon, and then this altar, this is the toddler part. They already had this name. They're keeping it because it is personal to them. Bumble. And we're going to be trying to, if not introduce them all, because some of them I don't think will be able to come out, we're at least going to try to talk about them and their roles in the system. And we're just going to be working with these 10 parts right now. They all represent subsystems, as we're polyfragmented, and they might be working towards integration pretty heavily within their subsystems, but they're going to be trying to stay as the parts that they are with those names, and kind of find their groundedness as individuals. So this is a very big deal for us. We would have done this, the exact process we're doing right now, a long time ago, except that with MK and the terror of accessing, it's been scary for us just to even have our own names, and sharing them with others, writing them down. This is all very intimidating. In the past, it really backfired, but I think that now we are ready. So I look forward to sharing more about them with you guys. I'm obviously a bigger part, kind of a mother protector inside. I have a non-binary identity, but I'm very mothering. And so we'll just see what happens. Candle, the first one on the list, is the main one that's coming out right now. And they're trying to specifically build a more conscious relationship with her husband. But I think they will probably be coming out in videos too. So I hope that you guys will enjoy meeting them, and yeah, I just look forward to continuing to share ourselves with you all. Thank you.